Hello, this is Spencer Cross, editor with LaRouchePack.com. We're here today organizing in Washington, D.C., distributing the two latest statements from the LaRouche Pack, Obama's Watergate moment and the end of Britain's bailout. Now, the situation is that Europe has collapsed, LaRouche is saying hyperinflation is coming here to the United States now, and the population is desperate for a solution. Now, we've been here to tell them that if they fight, we can win to save the United States. Now, that's going to involve ending this hyperinflation and ending this threat of war right now, which is coming from Tony Blair and the British Empire and this BS right to protect policy in Syria, which Lavrov, Putin, and General Dempsey are defending against from the United States. So we're saying the needed solutions are an immediate end to the bailouts, which means to prevent the threat of hyperinflation, you need to end the bailouts with a Glass-Steagall policy. Separate commercial from investment banking, write off the bailouts, have done with them for good. Now, beyond that, we need the immediate reimplementation of a credit system with a national bank, and that implies the construction of the NWAPA 21 project. So to do all of that, we need to remove Obama immediately, and in the second statement, Obama's Watergate moment, we illustrate that that is on the verge of happening now, but not without a fight. This isn't something that's going to passively happen unless we engage in the fight and organize. There's two pieces of legislation in the Congress now. H.R. 1489, put out by Marcy Kaptur for the immediate reimplementation of Glass-Steagall, and also H.C.R. 107, which is Walter Jones' bill to put the check on Obama, to say if you go to war, you are under threat of immediate impeachment, and our Constitution comes before any president. So that's what we're organizing for. That's what we're here for, Glass-Steagall immediately. It's not some nice policy. It's what needs to happen if we want to save the nation. So this is Spencer Cross, LaRouchePack.com. Thanks for watching.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you, Ed?
Good. I want to get right into it. Now, Mr. LaRouche, yourself, and others now at this point have said that Obama has reached a Watergate moment. Now, there are a few indications of this. I just want to kind of report to you and see what you think about. The first was a March 29th article in the New York Times, which discussed previously secret documentation on Obama's kill list and how he has been the so-called decider of which terrorists that are on that list who are going to live or die. There's another article that came out which exposed the fact that it was the Obama administration that not only developed but deployed cyber weapons in Iran, what's known now as the Stuxnet scandal. There's other things that have now come out after that. Obama has subsequently denied the fact that the administration leaked that. It's known now that it actually did come from Donilon inside of the administration. You also have investigations being called for by people like Feinstein and others. This thing is really building up, Jeff, and what does this all mean? Why is this the Watergate moment?
Well, quite simply, it's a Watergate moment because, number one, the alleged crimes, since they're still just under investigation, but the alleged crimes that took place either at the White House, at the National Security Council, or maybe perhaps through the Obama campaign apparatus, are the kind of crimes that rise to the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. In other words, these are major breaches of U.S. national security that should not have happened. When a leak comes out, the automatic response of the relevant intelligence agencies is to do a damage assessment. Number one, we're not just talking about how much money it blew, but are there agents in the field, double agents working, say, inside Iran or inside Yemen, who are now maybe jeopardized? Their lives may be, in deep, deep trouble because of this leak coming out. So the intelligence community knew instantly that this was one of the worst patterns of leaks of ongoing classified operations that's ever taken place. And if it was done for crass political purposes, such as bolstering Obama's poll numbers at a point that he was in a crash and burn moment, then this really constitutes an act of betrayal that warrants his immediate removal. So, you know, in the case of Richard Nixon and Watergate, I think that there's a critical overarching point that people don't always realize, but which was relevant both to the Nixon case and to the Obama case. Yes, there was a Watergate break-in, and the cover-up attempt around the Watergate break-in is what brought Nixon down. But before that happened, there was a broad consensus reached among leading people in the intelligence community and in both political parties that Nixon had crossed the line and was jeopardizing the survival of the republic. And I think that the thing that you have to realize in this case with Obama, that's what's happened in the recent period. We had the Libya war. We had the drone killings. We've had the kill lists. We've had the leaking of classified material. And in some cases, the Israelis have come out and said, hey, wait a minute, you know, Obama didn't do Stuxnet, didn't do this cyber war against Iran. We did it, and the U.S. was a reluctant partner and only came in late in the game. So in some cases, they're making stuff up. They're taking responsibility for secret operations that they really didn't even do. But in some of those cases, they're blowing real live operations anyway. So this has reached a certain threshold point where you've got several factors that all tend to have to be in play to have the kind of perfect mix for a Watergate type situation. Number one, you've got to have a certain consensus that the president's crossed the line and that there are other larger reasons why Obama's got to be brought down. Interestingly, in the case of Obama, Lyndon LaRouche came to that conclusion and, in fact, made the point publicly on an international public event webcast that took place on April 11th, 2009. He said the guy has the personality of an Emperor Nero. He's a severe narcissist, and this kind of combination, along with the fact that he's totally beholden to the British, these two factors make him a menace to the Republic. And now, 3 years later, people are coming around to say, gee whiz, this guy has crossed the line, and he is this kind of menace to the Republic. So leading members of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, are coming forward in a significant way. You saw the initial outpouring of this when Senator Jim Webb introduced the bill and said humanitarian interventionism is no excuse for an end run around Congress if you're going to go to war, and introduced a bill to that effect. And it's become very popular among Democrats and Republicans. Now you've got Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, who's a senior member of the Senate. She's the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she knows, along with the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, that the leaks to the New York Times and other news organizations have been egregious violations of national security that have probably cost the country billions of dollars in funds that will maybe only be known at some point in the future, but they've put people's lives on the line. They've been briefed by the Director of National Intelligence. They've been briefed by at least 8 senior intelligence community case officers, and they realize that this situation is one in which the president has got to be stopped. The third element of Watergate, and this is always the psychological factor that is very telling, there's a rush to cover up. And in this case, the president may very well have made the worst blunder of his presidency when he came out and convened a flash press conference last Friday and basically said that he was outraged, morally outraged, that anybody would accuse his White House of carrying out leaks in order to benefit his reelection campaign, jeopardizing national security for crass political purposes. Nixon said the same thing a week after the Watergate break-in, and it was the cover-up that tended to be the critical part of what ultimately brought Nixon down. The event itself, the Watergate break-in, was bad enough. But then the White House and the campaign went into full cover-up mode. You mentioned Tom Donilon, and he's already got a track record of leaking national security secrets to bolster the Obama team's reputation. It happened around details that should never have been made public about the assassination of Osama bin Laden. So Donilon is one of the people in the crosshairs. Patrick Cadell, a Democratic pollster and political operative, gave an interview yesterday in which he said openly that Donilon is one of the people that did the leaking. Other names that have come out are Valerie Jarrett, David Axelrod, who's no longer even in the government, is out in Chicago running the Obama re-election campaign, yet somehow or other, he's an invited guest to these kill list meetings every Tuesday that the president participates in. But look, ultimately, the person who is in the crosshairs of this scandal is President Obama himself. And he made matters far worse than they would have been otherwise by coming out on Friday and in his own words and his own voice in front of TV cameras and everything else said that the White House had nothing to do with this. I had nothing to do with this. And those words probably will come back to haunt him. We don't know where this is going to go, how it's going to play out. But it will play out, and it's going to play out very rapidly, long before we get to the Democratic convention in August and on to the November elections. This could bring down Obama and open up some real choices for November if the Democrats are freed from the shackles of Obama as the nominee.
Let's go back to what you said a few minutes ago about what Mr. LaRouche said in 2009, because what you just discussed could be surprising to a lot of people. Obama was supposed to be the guy who's going to get us out of Iraq, stop the war on terror, and what you just described, he's taken the war on terror far beyond anything that Bush could have even dreamed of, and it's even worse than that. But you said Mr. LaRouche 2009 actually said that Obama was a narcissistic personality, that he has a propensity to do everything that we're discovering now. I'd like you to just discuss that a little bit, because this is not something where it seems Obama made a mistake or he screwed up, but that this is who he is. And as long as he's in office, these are the kinds of things that we're going to expect.
Well, look, I was with Mr. LaRouche in 2008. We were out of town for a meeting, and after the meeting ended, we were just sitting around, and it was towards the run-up to the November 2008 presidential elections, and we turned on the TV and we were watching a campaign event that Obama was doing somewhere in, I think it was in Tennessee. And Mr. LaRouche turned to me and he said, "My God, this guy is completely empty. He's completely vacuous. He's got this sort of, way to present slogans and make these rote comments, but I don't even think he believes a word of what he's saying. He's really a very shallow and, in that sense, dangerous guy to have as president." But then he won the election. It was obvious he was going to win the election after he defeated Hillary Clinton, and then brought some people into the cabinet who indicated that they might have some kind of, real experience and might bring some grounding. And so you had Hillary Clinton come in as Secretary of State. They kept Bob Gates on as Secretary of Defense. They brought General James Jones in as National Security Advisor. And Mr. LaRouche was willing for a period of time to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe these people around him would curb some of these appetites the guy had. And then early in his presidency, I think it was his first overseas trip, probably in late March, early April of 2009, Obama went on this great big triumphalist tour of Europe and ended up in London and, literally groveled at the feet of the British monarchs. I mean, it was all there on television. And when Obama came back from that trip, he was in a real clinical narcissist kind of flight forward. And it was at that point that Mr. LaRouche came to the conclusion that, you could have the best advisors in the world surrounding this guy. Unless they're really ready to box him in, his psychology, his extreme narcissism, represented a danger that could go off in terrible directions. And so he had the courage at that point to go public. And he did this public event in April of 2009 and effectively broke with Obama, said that this guy is hopelessly mentally crippled and dangerous, and he's very clearly a slavishly loyal asset of the British, by which he meant the British oligarchy and the whole monetarist financial system for all practical purposes. Tim Geithner, Bernanke, these guys representing the interests of Wall Street and the City of London were the placeholders for this British apparatus right there, making all the key economic policy decisions. So his diagnosis was that this guy was going to be a dangerous disaster. And in that webcast, he talked about what happened to Emperor Nero when he really reached the end of the line and he turned on the very people around him and became a cold, absolute, calculating killer. And so here we are 3 years later, and, you know, he's the kill president. You know, what does he spend all of his time focused on? It's not rebuilding the economy, that's for damn sure. He spends all his time every Tuesday plowing over lists of names of people who he's going to put on the kill list. And if it can be done remotely by drones, all the better. And, you know, then because his campaign became obsessed with the polling data that showed that he was losing to, of all people, Mitt Romney, what do? They decide we have to present Obama's greatest accomplishments. And oh, by the way, they're all secret operations, all involving, you know, killing this person, you know, waging literally cyber warfare against this country. And we're going to let all the secrets out of the bag because we're desperate that this guy is going to go down big in the elections. So they walked themselves into a trap of their own making. There's no reason in the world why these special national security programs should have been leaked out to the media. And, you know, they did it in the form of giving David Sanger of the New York Times enough material to write a whole book. If somebody were to do a careful review of that book and come up with an itemized list of all of the national security secrets that were revealed simply to make Obama look good, to feed his narcissist ego and salvage his presidential campaign, there'd be criminal indictments coming down like crazy. And, you know, you've got Eric Holder, who within the next week is very likely to be held in contempt of Congress for failure to reveal details of this fast and furious gun-walking operation. And the demands are going to become enormous, bipartisan, from both Democrats and Republicans, especially in the Senate, that there must be an independent counsel. And once you start to get any kind of an independent investigation going into what this White House has really been all about for the last 3 years, then, you know, this could go very quickly.
Well, the last question then, Jeff, is what do we do now to make sure that Obama does go swiftly out of office?
We've got to basically make sure that there's no cover-up. The British are absolutely desperate. They put a big investment into Obama, and they basically could be holding a losing hand right now. They thought they could bluff Putin and the Russians into capitulating on the Syria and Iran situations, which would have given them the green light to go berserk and try to do everything possible to create a kind of world dictatorship to deal with the breakdown of that financial system. So we've got to basically keep a clear top-down view of things. There's three situations that are always the first thing on my plate every morning when I wake up. Number one, where do things stand on the total meltdown of the entire European financial system, meaning the entire transatlantic financial system? Number two, where do these things stand on the British provocations to get a big global war going, where the flashpoints are Syria and Iran, but it's a global targeting, and Russia and China are the number one priority countries they want to capitulate. And number three, Where do these things stand on the drive to bring this president down? Look, the only good option for the presidential elections comes November of this year is that Obama is removed from office well before the Democratic convention, meaning sometime over the next 3 months. And if that happens, then you've got a viable possibility of an alternative Democratic candidate. And people have to basically realize that we are in a grave crisis as a nation. The financial disintegration, the physical economic collapse in the transatlantic region, particularly the collapse here in the United States, has got to be addressed. And Mr. LaRouche laid out 3 policies that have to be enacted to reverse that collapse and solve the problem. Number 1, Glass-Steagall. Number 2, then you've got to establish a credit system based on the traditional American system approach that Hamilton, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Kennedy were all moving on. And then thirdly, you've got to launch a great project that will catalyze the imagination of the population, create millions of jobs very quickly, and the NWAPA, North American Water and Power Alliance proposal, is exactly that. So Obama's got to go. And then in the wake of that, or as that's happening, we've got to get Glass-Steagall through right away. It's the only salvation both for the U.S. and Europe. And then from there, we've got to implement these policies. But for that to happen, Obama's got to be removed. So push on those issues. Other things, secondary, ignore them. Focus on the things that will make the big difference and move on them fast because time's running out.